Red Sox versus the Yankees, Big Mac versus the Whopper, Coke and Pepsi. When entities compete, they often want to be the best. Who is the greatest of them all? Much like racing, this is the same. But when you have all the drivers on the track competing to be number one, with that Ricky Bobby attitude if you're not first or last, you tend to create some enemies out there, and a rivalry is born. I'm Justin with NRN, and here's my list of the top 10 best rivalries in racing. Number 10, Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg. This story begins with two young competitive drivers who dreamed of one day becoming world champions. These two drivers would eventually become the best of friends as they raced up through the leagues. Off the track, they would do all the things that best friends like to do: play video games and ride unicycles. They dreamed of one day getting to be teammates on a Formula One team and racing together for the World Championship. That dream became a reality in 2013 when Hamilton joined Rosberg at Mercedes, but that was also the beginning of a nightmare. It all started during the 2014 Monaco Grand Prix when Rosberg appeared to get in Hamilton's way during his qualifying lap trying to keep him from the pole. Then the two crashed into one another at Spa. Then there was Shanghai and Austin, Texas, which sealed the deal on Hamilton's third championship over Rosberg. But the two battled again in 2016 for the championship, and it would be Rosberg who would win over Hamilton. During the 2016 offseason, Rosberg announced his retirement from the sport, ending the rivalry. Not sure how the friendship is going these days, though. Number 9, Jimmy Spencer and Kurt Busch. The punch heard round motorsport. Before we go any further, you have to remember that Jimmy Spencer never forgets. It all began in Phoenix in 2001 when Spencer, who was a lap down, spun Kurt Busch, who was on the lead lap. Then in 2002, Spencer took the lead from Kurt Busch during the Food City 500 at Bristol, only for Kurt to return the favor with a Spencer-like move. Kurt did the bump and run on Spencer to win the race. Later that year at the Brickyard 400, Spencer would get his revenge by giving Kurt Busch the boot into turn 3 and putting him into the wall. They would tangle again in 2003 at Michigan, and it finally came to blows when Spencer punched Kurt right in the face after the race. Jimmy Spencer was suspended by NASCAR after that incident, which I think was more to protect the young and skinny Kurt Busch from the Mongo-like driver Jimmy Spencer. Number 8, Mark Webber and Sebastian Vettel. Even though there can only be one winner at the end of the day, racing is still a team sport. The saying goes, there is no I in team after all. But a team attitude was far from Red Bull in 2013. The driver pairing of Mark Webber and Sebastian Vettel had been rocky. Webber was a seasoned driver coming towards the end of his career, and Vettel was a young and aggressive driver in his beginnings. During the Malaysian Grand Prix, Red Bull issued a team order to Vettel, who was in second, not to overtake his teammate Webber, who was leading the race. Webber cut the power back on his engine after hearing the order, knowing that Red Bull wanted him to take the victory. But Vettel didn't get the memo and went on to ignore the order and passed Webber to win the race. During the entire press conference, Webber stares down his teammate as if at any moment he would kill the young German. Vettel, however, was never punished by the team, and Webber writes in his tell-all book, Aussie Grit, that it was because he hired a team of lawyers to make sure Red Bull couldn't touch him. The sneaky devil. Number 7, Richard Petty and David Pearson. Sometimes a rivalry is not all about hatred and friction towards the other guy. Every now and again, a rivalry can be built on respect. Respect is what Petty and Pearson had for one another, but the two couldn't have been different. Petty was racing royalty and had grown up in a racing family. Pearson wasn't born into racing. He had to climb a tree to get a look at his first stock car race, and the first car he raced was paid for by his friends and family. Petty loved the fame that racing brought, while Pearson was quiet and was only there to race. The first major battle between Pearson and Petty was in '61, at the first running of the World 600. Pearson would win the day for Ray Fox. From 1963 to 1977, the two finished 1-2 63 times. The two drivers even have the honors of having one of the most exciting finishes in NASCAR during the 1975 Daytona 500, when the two crashed 600 yards from the finish line. Pearson limped home for the win. Petty and Pearson were so dominant at the front of the field that the other drivers were often forgot about. Petty retired with 200 career wins to Pearson's 105, and I think that's pretty telling at how great the two really were. Number 6, Jeff Gordon and Dale Earnhardt. When Dale Earnhardt made his first NASCAR start, Jeff Gordon was 4 years old. When Jeff Gordon made his first NASCAR start, Dale Earnhardt was a 5-time champion. From the moment Gordon arrived, he showed promise. and once he began winning in 1994, he quickly built a following. He was the kid, and Earnhardt was the intimidator. Much like Petty and Pearson, the two were always racing one another. The fans even became split between the two men and formed tribes at the track. You were either a Gordon fan or an Earnhardt fan, but never both. You could almost say that Gordon represented something new. Gordon was the fresh young star of racing and Earnhardt was the battle-weathered veteran. But the two drivers always had a respect for one another. To this day, fans are still split on who was better, Gordon or Earnhardt, 24 or 3. Number 5, Nigel Mansell and Nelson Piquet. Having a teammate is a comforting thing, knowing that you have at least one driver out on the track who has your back and looks after your best interest. Or you could have a teammate like Nigel Mansell or Nelson Piquet. These two Williams teammates despised each other and had fierce battles during the 1986 and 87 seasons. Nelson Piquet joined the team as a two-time world champion, which earned him lead driver status. However, it soon became clear that his teammate Mansell could match the Brazilian. Mansell was outdoing Piquet during their first season together, and as Mansell's superiority grew, the relationship between the two drivers worsened. One of the most memorable moments of the rivalry was at the 1987 British Grand Prix at Silverstone. Mansell made an unplanned pit stop which gave his teammate Piquet the lead. Mansell had fresh tires but was a long way behind. He got the whip out and over the next 19 laps broke the lap record 11 times. Mansell chased his teammate Nelson Piquet like a bat out of hell. He caught him, passed him, and would go on to win the race. Mansell had pushed so hard that during the cool-down lap, his engine blew. Number 4, Matt Kenseth and Joey Logano. Drivers are not always known for keeping their cool in tense situations. Sometimes rivalries amongst the boys can get ugly. During the 2015 NASCAR chase, the favorite was Joey Logano. He and Kenseth first came together at Kansas when Logano spun him to win the race and be guaranteed entry into the next round of the playoffs. Kenseth swore revenge on the youngster, and he would have his revenge at Martinsville. During the race, Matt Kenseth was spun by Logano's Penske teammate Brad Keselowski. Kenseth's car was very heavily damaged, and with his chances of a race win and a championship over, he got the car back on the track to salvage the year with one last act of ramming his number 20 into the side of Logano. Kenseth said that his damaged race car simply wouldn't turn, but NASCAR wasn't buying it and suspended Kenseth. Logano would not be able to recover over the next two races, and his chances at a championship that year were over. Revenge is a dish best served cold. Number 3, Yarborough and the Allisons. NASCAR might not be what it is today had it not been for this famous rivalry that came to blows on national TV. For the first time ever, the 1979 Daytona 500 would be televised live in its entirety. During the race, Yarborough was racing with Donnie Allison when the two would collide on the last lap. Earlier that day, they had already come together, but both were able to pull away and continue racing. This time they weren't so lucky. Both cars were damaged and Richard Petty went on to win the race. But at the site of the crash, the cameras were aimed at Yarborough, who was coming to blows with both Bobby and Donnie Allison. The fight became one of the biggest things that had ever happened to the sport and created leagues of NASCAR fans. Number 2, Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna. In 1988, Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost, two of the greatest Formula One drivers, became teammates at McLaren. Between the two of them, they were able to win 15 of the 16 races that year. Senna would go on to complete the season with a championship. But the very next year, Prost and Senna collided with one another at the last race of the season in Japan that secured Prost a championship win. Senna, a Brazilian driver, believed that the politics of F1 favored Prost. The next year, things hit a repeat button, and Senna and Prost were once again going for the championship at Japan. Senna had won the pole and wanted the grid slots reversed so that his slot would be where the grip is for the start of the race. He was denied this, and when the race started, Prost, who was now in a Ferrari, had the lead. Senna rammed his car into Prost, taking both drivers out of the race again, and secured a third championship for Senna. In the years following, teams wanted to sign the pair, but Prost swore he would never be on the same team as Senna ever again. Prost retired from F1 in 1993, and Senna was tragically killed at Imola the very next year. Number 1, Niki Lauda and James Hunt. This is considered one of the greatest rivalries in all of racing. It's so famous that a film was made about it in 2013 titled Rush. Lauda and Hunt came up through the ranks together in Formula 3. In 1976, these two would go head-to-head for one of the best championship battles in history. James Hunt started out the season quick with pole positions in 3 of the first 6 races. However, Lauda had won 4 of the 6. During round 9 at the British Grand Prix, hometown hero James Hunt was favored to win, but it would be Lauda who would score the pole. At the start of the race, there was a huge crash that took out Hunt and Lauda's teammate. The race was to be restarted, with Regazzoni and Hunt in spare cars. The second restart was much better, and Lauda led most of the race until he had a gearbox issue, handing the lead over to James Hunt. The Englishman would win it for the British fans. However, Ferrari would protest the win, saying that he was in a spare car, even though their own driver Regazzoni had started in a spare car too. Anyway, the FIA took the win away from Hunt and handed it to Lauda. But on August 1st, Lauda would crash during the German Grand Prix and would suffer severe burns. With Lauda out, Hunt appeared to be the guy that could take the championship. Weeks later, Lauda would return to the car. Although he didn't win the rest of the season, Lauda battled with Hunt and would lose the championship to the British driver by only 1 point. Do you agree with my list? Is there a rivalry you think I missed? If so, then let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Racing Top 10s. I'm Justin with NRN, and thanks for watching.